In this last video in this module, I'm going to consider whether or not we can re-identify souls. Just briefly remember, we're looking at this argument about whether or not the soul view of personal identity is correct. And the soul view of personal identity says, what is it to be the same person over time? It's just to have the same soul over time, just to be the same soul over time. And we saw at the end of the previous video the following argument against that view, which says on the one hand, we can re-identify people, but on the other hand, we cannot re-identify souls. And if both of those claims are true, then we are not souls. People are not souls. Well, the one premise, we can re-identify people, that's almost certainly true. The other premise, we can't re-identify souls, that's just not at all obvious one way or the other. So we're going to consider whether or not it's true or false, what we should say about it. So let's remember, yesterday and today, Sandra is the same person. She has survived, and not only has she survived, but you can know that she's survived. And when you can know that when you encountered her yesterday and when you encounter her today, you can tell that it's the same person. You know, oh, it's my friend Sandra again. You have re-identified her. Now, if it really is Sandra according to the soul view, then not only it's the same person, but we have the same body, yeah? And presumably it's sort of similar psychology, but we also have the same soul attached to that body at both times. And so if you re-identify Sandra, what you really need to do is you need to re-identify her soul. It's not enough that it's the same body there in front of you. You need to know, it's the same soul. And once you know that it's the same soul, then you can conclude, yes, this is the same person I'm interacting with. Now, so you perceive your friend's body and behavior, and you wonder, is this the same person as I had lunch with yesterday? And if the soul view is correct, then it is the same person, only if the same soul is connected to this body that's in front of you now and was connected to the body that was in front of you yesterday. And so if you're going to know that it's the same person, then you need to know that it's the same soul that you yesterday had lunch with and are now talking to. So you might expect that souls would remain attached to bodies. Once a body gets a soul, that soul stays attached to that body. But suppose the following happened. Suppose that yesterday, there's Sandra's body. So there's Sandra the person, and she's got a body and a soul, and she is the soul. Okay? So at least up through yesterday. Suppose that for some reason, somehow, however souls get attached to bodies, a new soul gets attached to Sandra's body, and the old soul, what was Sandra's body, her soul, who knows what happens to it? Maybe it's destroyed, maybe it goes to heaven, maybe it gets attached to another body, but whatever happens, it's removed from her body. So we got Sandra's body lasts, okay? But what happens is that at some point during the night, the soul that's attached to Sandra's body gets switched, and Sandra's body gets a new soul. Now that means that it's not Sandra anymore, right? Why? Well, because souls are people, so if we have a new soul, then we have a new person, and that's what we've said happens in this scenario. So we have numerically distinct souls, right? Because there are two of them. There's soul 1 and soul 2. When you have two things, they're numerically distinct, right? Each thing is numerically identical with itself and numerically distinct from everything else. Now let's imagine, but remember, we can have objects that are numerically distinct but qualitatively identical. But let's imagine that's not what happens in this scenario. Let's say that in this scenario, soul 2 is not only a different soul from soul 1 in the sense that there are two of them, but that soul 2 differs in many other ways. It has different memories and personalities from soul 1. So that makes this scenario kind of like the rubber ducky toy boat scenario, right? We have two objects, the ducky and the boat, and they're numerically distinct because there are two of them, but then also they're qualitatively distinct because they have different qualities. So let's imagine that this scenario is similar. We have two souls, and they're different. The first soul is let's say, a very gregarious and friendly and likes to chat, and the second soul is more introverted and doesn't like to chat so much. The first soul remembers going to Disneyland. The second soul does not remember going to Disneyland. So we've got soul 1 and soul 2, and they're different in a variety of ways. Soul 2 has different memories, different personality, different psychology from Soul 1. If you were to then encounter the body that used to be Sandra's and that is now occupied by Soul 2, you would quickly discover that something weird had happened because the the person that you encountered would be behaving very differently than the way that Sandra behaved. And you might conclude, oh, they have a new soul, or you might conclude, oh, they got hit on the head, or who knows what exactly you would conclude, but you would be able to tell, oh, something has gone wrong, something is different, because his body that used to be Sandra's, it's behaving in a very, very different way than it behaved when it was Sandra's body. Okay, so we have so far two scenarios. There's the sort of what you would expect scenario, that the same soul is attached to the body for the body's lifetime. Second scenario, oh, sometimes new souls get attached to old bodies, and when they do, the souls are numerically distinct, but also qualitatively distinct from the old soul. And so there are lots of changes you can see when this soul change happens. But we can imagine another kind of scenario. In this kind of scenario, Sandra, is chugging along. She's a soul. She's attached to a body. Then at some point, she gets detached from that body, and a new soul gets attached to that body. But what happens this time is that the new soul, it's qualitatively identical to Sandra's soul. So we have soul 1 chugging along, that's Sandra, and then at some point over the night, a new soul, that Sandra's soul is detached, we get a new soul attached to Sandra's body, but this new soul is qualitatively identical to the old soul. The new soul and the old soul behave in exactly the same ways, so they're qualitatively identical. Soul 2 has the same memories and personality as Soul 1, and so this is like the situation where we have two rubber duckies, right? We have rubber ducky 1, bang, it gets stamped out of the factory, and then bang, another rubber ducky, or I don't know, it's injection molding, whatever it is. Then we get another one. So there are two of them. Their qualities are exactly the same, but there are two of them. And so that's what we're imagining happens in this situation. Soul 1 is chugging along, and then that first soul gets removed from Sandra's body, and the second soul gets stuck in, so it's a new soul, because it's numerically distinct, but it's a copy of the old soul, and so it has the same personality and same apparent memories. So this one, Soul 2, it's going to be, and if you wanted to know that it was the second person isn't, that you're now encountering, it's the same body, but it's a new person, well, you'd have to know, oh, there's a new soul here, right? You'd have to be able to tell, aha, new soul. But it might be much more difficult. Perhaps it might even be impossible to tell that there's a new soul here, because how would you do that? In the previous situation where we had a second soul, that soul had different personality, different psychology, different memories, and that led to different behaviors. But here, the new soul doesn't have a different psychology. It has the same psychology, same personality, same memories. So it's going to behave just the same as the old soul. So how would you tell that there was a new soul? So just to be clear about where we are, we have three scenarios. Scenario 1 is soul stays attached to the same body for the body's entire lifetime. Scenario 2, no souls get attached to a body during the body's lifetime, but the new soul, when it is attached, it's psychologically quite different from the old soul that it replaces. Or new souls get attached to a body during a body's lifetime, and the new soul is psychologically exactly the same as the old soul it replaces. So, same soul over time, numerically and qualitatively distinct new soul, or numerically distinct but qualitatively identical new soul. So those are the three scenarios. So here they all are, right? First scenario, same soul. Second scenario, soul 1 and then soul 2. And third scenario, soul 1 and then soul 2. And the difference between the second and third scenarios is that in the second scenario, the new soul is qualitatively distinct. It has a different psychology. In the third case, the second soul is qualitatively identical. It has the same psychology. So you can easily tell 2 apart from 1 and 3 because there's this radical change in behavior, right? It's like, oh, there's this new behavior, something has happened, and maybe it's a soul difference, but like clearly we can pick up that we can at least detect a difference. Yeah, we might have to figure out, is it, really because it's a new soul, but there's a difference that we could detect between case 2 on the one hand and cases 1 and 3 on the other hand. But can you tell 1 and 3 apart from one another? How would you do that? The body's the same. The behavior's the same. You can't directly observe the soul, right? So how do we? What we want to know is it the same soul, or is it a new soul that's a qualitative copy of the old soul? And how would you tell from the outside? Well, it seems like there's nothing you can do, right? From your perspective, everything seems the same because the bodies are the same and the behaviors are the same, and that's all the evidence you have. So in fact, you can't tell 1 and 3 apart, and that means you can't re-identify souls. Is today's soul the same as yesterday's? Is this Sandra's body with her soul, or is it what was her body with a new soul that is a qualitative duplicate? You can't tell. So there are these 3 possibilities, and to tell whether or not soul 1 or soul 2 is attached to the body, you would have to tell that there's some difference between them. You'd have to tell there's some difference between soul 1 and soul 2. How would you do that? Well, you could look at the body. Well, maybe you could directly perceive souls, but we can't do that. You could look at the body, but there's no difference between the body, whichever soul is attached to it. Or you could look at the behavior. But again, the behavior is going to be the same in some cases because the souls are qualitative duplicates, even though they're numerically distinct. Even though they are literally soul 1 and soul 2, they're exactly the same in terms of all their psychological characteristics, and so they produce exactly the same behavior. So there are no perceptible differences between it's soul 1 the whole time and it's a new soul that just acts the same. You can't tell the difference, and that means you cannot re-identify souls in other people. You can't tell, is it a new soul or not? I mean, you don't know. Now, you might think, oh, look, but I know that if it's the same body, then it's the same soul. So you meet your friend's body, you re-identify the body, however you do that, and you conclude that it's the same soul based on the fact that on the one hand, it's the same body, and on the other hand, if it's the same body, then it's the same soul. But how do you know that if the body is the same, then the soul is the same? How would you possibly know that? Well, here's how you might try to figure that out. You'd say, aha, I found the same, here's the same body over again. Let me see if it has the same soul over again. So you'd have to check. You have to say, okay, here's my method for checking soul sameness. And yes, it is the same soul. So I found the same body and I checked to see is it the same soul. And then if that happens enough times, if it always happens that whenever I check for soul sameness, it is the same soul, then I would say, good. I know that if it's the same body, then it's the same soul. But this isn't going to work. This isn't a way you could come to know same body, same soul, because we don't have any method for checking same soulness. That's the problem. If we had a method for checking soul sameness, we wouldn't need to know that it's always the same body and the same soul. We would just use that method when we encounter what was Sandra's body and find out if there's a new soul in it or not. The problem is that we don't have any method for directly checking soul sameness, and so we can't do the second step of this procedure, and so we can't come to know same body, then same soul. If we knew that, if it were true and we knew it, we could use it to re-identify souls. But whether or not supposing that there were souls, and supposing that this were true, same body, then same soul, we still wouldn't be able to know it, and so it still wouldn't help us in re-identifying souls. And what about self-re-identification? There's actually a similar problem here. So here I am, as an infant, and now as a teacher of this course. Well, here are 2 possible scenarios. Here's what I hope has actually happened. The infant body, and now this body, right? It's the same body, and the same soul has been attached to it. But maybe one soul was attached to the body that was this body as an infant, and now a different soul is now attached to this body. So I now am soul 1, but how can I tell the difference between whether or not my infant body had soul 1 and it had soul 2? How do I tell which soul I have? How do I tell that I've had the same soul? Right? Well, if I can't tell that I've had the same soul, then my whole narrative about my life collapses because it wasn't me. And similarly, my whole narrative about how I relate to other people would collapse if it wasn't me who was relating to them, or if it wasn't them over time, right? It's, oh, no, you married soul 1, but now it's soul 2 in the body of your spouse. In fact, it's not even your spouse anymore, because to be your spouse, you have to have married them. It has to be the person you married, and it's not the person you married because there's a new soul there. So you have a memory of doing something yesterday. Was it the same soul? Was it really you? Maybe the soul that you are right now did it, or the different soul did what happened yesterday, and then that soul was replaced with you, the new soul, your soul 2, and you got soul 1's memories. So you remember doing it, but you actually didn't do it. That's false. How could you tell, right? How could you tell? All the means by which you have to tell, they are gone. You don't have access to them, right? Precisely because you, the soul that you are now, is a duplicate of the soul that was in your body yesterday. So the soul theory has a problem. We can't directly perceive souls our own or others. Probably we couldn't re-identify souls if there were any, but we can re-identify people, and this means that people are not souls. So this argument looks sound. It looks like we can re-identify people, true. We can't re-identify souls. I've been arguing that that's true, and if those are both true, then people aren't souls. Identity over time is not the matter of having the same soul over time. Now, you might think, look, these soul scenarios, they're really fantastic. We don't worry about them. Why are you worried about them? I'd say, well, they are fantastic, and we don't worry about them. But the fact that we don't worry about them, that's a manifestation of the fact that we're not souls. If we were souls, we would have to worry about these scenarios. They're wild and sort of out there, and we don't worry about them. But why don't we worry about them? Because we're not souls in the first place. If we were, then it would be a pressing problem. How do you tell that this body over here has the same soul as it did yesterday? How do I tell that the soul, I have these memories of doing something? How do I tell that it was me, that soul, that had those experiences, and not some other soul, and that I just got these memories falsely? Well, I don't worry about those possibilities. And what that tells me is that we're not souls, because if we were souls, I would need to worry about those possibilities. So I think being the same person over time, that's not the same thing as being the same soul over time. Now, it doesn't actually show there aren't souls, but it does show that what matters to being who we are isn't being a soul. So what are we? Well, we'll look at the body view and the personality view in the next units. Now, we might come out of those units thinking, oh, I don't like those body views and those personality views so much. Maybe I should reconsider the soul view. Maybe I think we can re-identify souls, something like that. But for now, we're going to look at those other views because it looks like the soul view does have this really big problem. It's hard to see how you could re-identify souls, and yet we re-identify people all the time. So how could souls and people be the same thing?